Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. 1. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Q&A with Nigel Travis and Mark Devlin. My name is George. I work in the club's media team. As I said, very happy to be joined by Nigel and Mark this evening. Without further ado, let's go straight into question 1. So, Nigel, this one's for you. So, from Ed Turns, the fan, not Ed Turns, the defender. He asks, is there an option to extend Brandon Cooper's loan deal in January to make it a full season one?
Okay, so first, Ed, you'll always be famous. So thank you for your question. Secondly, like you, based on your question, we're very pleased with Brandon's performances so far. And actually, I think we've got several centre halves who are doing very nicely. I know from talking to him myself, he's enjoying his time with us. It's a bit early to decide whether we'll be making it a full season one. I think we have the option, but we tend to start in the middle of November thinking about the transfer window. So it'll probably be another 2 or 3 weeks before we have those discussions. But based on everything I know, everyone is very excited about what he's doing.
Cool. Thank you, Nigel. Follow up to that one is, are there plans to make any of the loan signings permanent Leyton Orient players? That was asked by a few different supporters.
Yeah, I don't want to be a cop-out. I like to answer all the questions, but I think we've had a good season so far with our loan players, and they've all contributed one way or another. And it's kind of unusual to have a captain in games who's a lone player, which is Idris El Mazouni. I think, again, my answer is we tend to sit down, talk about things in the middle of November, so we're ready to go at the start of January. So too early to say, but we like the way they've all contributed. And I would also say we're very pleased with our signings overall. Unfortunately, Dan, a guy who actually made a strong appearance at International Day, but not playing football, has been injured. And we see him coming in and contributing, potentially replacing Jordan Graham or adding to our strike force. But I think it's going to be a very good signing. And it's interesting, one of our new employees in the club is a Crew fan, and he told me yesterday how good he is. So we're really excited about him coming back.
Orient Fan TV asks, what are your thoughts on the season so far? And if we are in reach of the playoffs in January, will funds be made available?
Okay, so I think the fans have heard some of this before, so I'll be repetitious. Firstly, we had a tough start to the season, and in the first 4 games, we actually got 1 more point than I expected. So I think where we stand with 20 points right now is very good. I think we slipped a couple of places last night as we weren't playing, but others were. So we're 14th. I think that is commendable given the start we had. We're on a unbeaten run. I recognise we've had 3 draws in succession. So I'm pleased. I think we'll, again, making a true assessment of where we are in November, December and January. And I think it's important that we look where we are in January. Will there be funds available? I think everyone needs to know, and I'll be very straightforward. We actually took some of the funds from January and put them into our signings in the summer. And I think those signings have paid off. Unfortunately, we've had injuries. People like Max Sanders and Dan Guy again. The one thing we're not going to do is put our club's sustainability at risk. But I've always said that this will be a year of consolidation. And we're very confident in the squad we have as a whole. Does it need the odd tweak? Probably. And we will do everything to facilitate that.
Excellent. Thank you, Nigel. I will say before I go on to the next question, if you are watching along on YouTube and you would like to submit a question, if we have got time, then we will get around to a few more. So the next one, Nigel, is When are you going to give Richie Wellens a new contract to show the faith in him to be the man to take us to the Championship?
Well, we did give him a new contract last season, and I actually talked to him. I talked to Richie a lot, and it's not just about football. You know, relationships are more than just a job. I'm pleased to say we have a really good relationship with Richie. I think all our fans love him. We love him. We have huge faith in him, and he loves the club. So we feel we're in a good spot with Richie. As I've again said before, if someone in the Championship came along, we'd probably be a little bit vulnerable, but Richie really values relationships. I mean, he's been burnt before. He's been in football for a long time, so we feel good. And if we feel that we need to extend his contract, we will. But right now, we feel we're in a good spot. Mark, anything to add to that?
No, I think you've summed it up succinctly, Nigel. No, nothing for me.
Right, on to the next one. Leif Granlind, who's a Swedish supporter who was at one of our games not so long ago, actually. He asks, will there be a Leyton Orient app for Apple TV in the future?
The answer is we aren't permitted to do that by the EFL at the moment, and I think it's unlikely in the future. You can effectively watch all the games on the app, and I'm looking at George just to confirm that's true. And I think that, let me just explain this, and I'll try and make it non-technical. And George, if I get any of it wrong, just interrupt me. I watch our games in all kinds of places. I'm constantly traveling. I watched last Tuesday's game at Northampton in the Philadelphia airport, and I had all kinds of people walking by me watching the game. But I watched it on my laptop, which I'm using right now. Sometimes when I have other things to do, I convert to the app, and you can do that. You should know that you're limited in the number of different devices you can have. It's a bit like Netflix and password sharing. I think the limit's 2. So you can go from your laptop to your phone, but you can't have like 4 devices. I mean, at home, I use the computer behind me to watch all our games. So I think we've made it as versatile as we can, and the app is probably something many people don't think of using. You can listen to audio, you can watch the game. When I pick up my daughter, I've sat in the school car parking watching the game. So I'd encourage our fans, if they've got access to streaming, which I know occasionally it's just, well, many times it's just international, to do that. So I think the app could be better used than it's been in the past. Did I get that right, George?
Yep, that was all accurate. So in terms of an actual dedicated TV app, Leif, that's not something we're permitted to do at the moment. So like a Leyton Orient equivalent to a Netflix or an Amazon Prime app, we can't do that at the moment. But what you can do is use the mobile app on either your phone or your tablet, and then a lot of smart devices will allow you to mirror or cast that stream onto a TV. So that's probably your best bet at the moment if you are using a mobile device.
Yeah, and I sometimes do that as well, where you just click on the button and it goes on the TV to make it a bigger screen. Sorry, Mark.
Can I just add something there on the app, just for those guys? We are looking to make the app even more valuable. We know it's not as doesn't offer as much functionality as we would like. George and his team are currently talking to our current developer and a couple of other developers as to how we can make the app more valuable with things like exclusive content, being able to embed the swipe station app inside our own app to make it even quicker than it already is. So there will be some developments over the course of the next 2 or 3 months as we look to improve our app. We know it's not where we want it to be, and we will have it improved in the very near future.
Thank you, Mark. Next question's coming from Billy Reid. He asks, did anything come of your meeting last month with Waltham Forest Council in regards to stadium redevelopment or possible sites for relocation within the borough?
So I'm going to start saying it was overall a very positive meeting, but Mark's had other discussions since, so I'm going to let him answer that one.
Yeah, just to reiterate, the council are very keen to see the club continue to flourish and grow. They're very keen to see us remain in the borough. They know we're a valuable asset, both as a community asset and also to the local economy. There are some things that they're not really willing to shift on, things like parking. So I might as well get that out in the open because I know that's a bugbear, understandable bugbear. We're gonna come up with some parking suggestions. We are talking to schools. There are some areas not too far away from the ground that you can park, particularly on Saturdays. So we're going to provide some additional information to support us on some of those roads. In terms of stadium development, they're very keen to see just to be absolutely clear, we believe we need a stadium. If we're going to grow as a business and as a club, we probably need to at least double our current capacity, which is sort of the best part of 9,000, even though we can't quite get there because of some restrictions in the East Stand. So we are looking, we believe we need a stadium north of 17,000, somewhere 17, 20,000. Crowds are growing, new fans are coming into the area. So we can see steady growth off the field. Richie and the team are doing fantastic things to keep people interested. And there's an awful lot of interest in Leyton Orient. And the last 6.5 years have been a wonderful story. So the council recognise all of that. So they've asked us to investigate what we can do at Brisbane Road to get those seats in. Having talked to the specialists in our project team that are looking at this for us, I really do personally think it's unlikely we can find those additional seats at Brisbane Road. However, the project team are going to thoroughly investigate that. The flats in the corners are the obvious things that make growth of the stadium a little bit harder than it would otherwise be. But our first port of call is to see what's possible at Brisbane Road. And then those very positive conversations with the council included them identifying a number of sites, some owned by them, some not owned by them, that we could also look at. And the project team have been looking at that as well. Our focus for the moment is to look at Brisbane Road to see what can be done there. If that proves impossible, then we will look at other sites. But I would stress that any move to a new stadium is realistically 5 to 10 years away. I mean, I think I've mentioned this previously. It took Brentford something in the region of 17 years to find a site and then to actually move into it. So that's one of the issues with being in a London borough. Spaces at a premium.
So, Mark, that's frightening to me. That would mean I'd be 90 before we moved. But I think I want to just add one thing. You mentioned the parking. As most people know, when I'm in London, I have a place in West London. The Elizabeth line has revolutionised travelling to Leyton Orient. I can get from Westbourne Grove, Notting Hill to Leyton Orient, walking both ends via Paddington, Elizabeth line, Stratford, Leyton, then walking again in 40 minutes. And I think as a lot of our fans live out in Essex, they've got the access to the Elizabeth line as well. So if you haven't tried it, I'd encourage you to try it. It's a great service and a real addition to the transport options.
Right. Thank you, Nigel and Mark, for that one. Next question is more of a football-y one. E10 Rifles says and asks, with the addition of one quality striker, I think we could challenge for a playoff spot this season. Can we afford to be promoted, or would we need new and or more investors if we were to get to the Championship? And a couple of others have asked similar questions as well.
Okay, all right. So this is a complicated question, so I'm going to really make it simple. And George, if you don't think it's clear enough, please push back. So firstly, we're not going to turn down the chance of going to the Championship. And I'm not going to say the assessment of one quality striker is right or not. I think we've got a quality team, but you can always improve. That one quality striker could be Dan Agaye. I don't want to build him up too much. I've now mentioned him 3 times, so someone will think I'm in love with him. All I know is that when I saw him play for Crewe last year, he was very dangerous. Everyone's kind of excited on the coaching side, so he may be the person. Let's move on to the Championship. And Mark's got more experience about the Championship than anyone. But the average club in the Championship currently loses 15 million. We cannot afford to lose 15 million because it means we have to we just can't, put it that way. I mean, we grumble about losing 1, 2, 3 million. 15 million is ridiculous. Now, we don't have to lose 15 million. And a club who went up, let's say in the south, went up, and immediately you get 5.5 times the amount of money from the league that you get in League One. So if you manage your budget right, you can actually make a profit. The trouble is, you may not be competitive on the field. So that's the dilemma. So I think it's very difficult. There are all kinds of discussions going on, which we've talked before about redistribution and cost controls. The Championship is a problem division. Let's put it like that. I don't think anyone disagrees with that because everyone is throwing money at players and the squad to try and get into the Premier League. So I think, so reading your exact question, we would go for it, but we probably could not afford to have the kind of squad needed to be successful in the Championship without extra financing, put it that way. And I think it's fair to say that if we went out for extra financing, we'd have to at least have a direction of travel for the stadium and a new training ground. And Mark's very energized by working on that project. So I don't know, George, is that a simple answer or do you think there needs more clarification?
No, that all made sense to me, but I don't know if Mark, if you wanted to add to that at all.
No, the only thing I would add, and I like a lot of people, I read message boards from time to time. It is a misnomer to say that the club doesn't want to get promoted. Of course, we want to get promoted, but the club also has suffered from bad ownership in the past, and we want to be a club that's stable, so that the club is here long after Nigel and myself and the rest of the board have all departed this planet and this earth. So we want to make sure we do it in the right way. But of course, if Richie and the players, and we do have a good squad, if Richie and the players are on the cusp of it, you know, there's no being frightened of being promoted. I mean, it'll be a bit scary when we get there because, as Nigel has said, there's some big numbers. But it is a bit of a misnomer, though, to say that the club doesn't want to get promoted this year. Of course, we want to get promoted when we can. But realistically, we know where our budget is this year, and it will require, you know, probably overperformance by the team to do that. But I just wanted to make that point clear because I've seen that raised a couple of times, and I just think it's unfair through whatever has been heard or said or read about to think that people we don't have the ambition to get promoted. My job in the background is trying to build a group of staff, and we've been pretty successful. And George, without embarrassing you, you're part of it, where we've started to improve the skill sets to get ready for us to be in the Championship. So I just wanted to make that point, really.
Okay, great. Next question I think is a really interesting one. This is coming from Sam, who asks, is there a possibility of the South Stand ever changing to safe standing?
Okay, so I'm going to let Mark answer this, but let me just tee it up. I'm very frustrated by what I call the UK rules against the US. I go to events here in the US. No ground in the US would ever pass UK safety rules. So that's the first thing I say. Everyone also drinks, and there is trouble at most games in the States of all sports. People don't realise that, and I think football's been penalised by the events of the 70s and 80s. But we're in the UK. We have to put up with those rules, and I think the atmosphere at home this year has been great. And always we're very grateful for the fans' support, both home and away, and particularly away, they've been fantastic. So, Mark, safe standing is beyond my pay grade, so over to you.
Well, again, just to reiterate, the atmosphere has really built. I have to say, I'm not sure I was ever a fan of a drum inside grounds, but I have to say the way it's being used home and away recently, it's been great, and it's really added something to the atmosphere. and I hope we can turn the volume up even further still. And we're happy to listen to any suggestions and ideas for how we can help the fan base without it being uncool, if you like, to generate even more atmosphere. The safe standing, one reason putting safe standing in is that we could increase the capacity, which sadly, I think I might have explained previously. It's not the size of the stand, it's the facilities we have in the concourses. And you can only, if we were to put safe standing in, we could only fit in the same number of fans that are currently in the in any of those stands. It is entirely down to the size of the concourses and the facilities, both catering and the loos, etc., that we have in the background. So we would be spending money to maybe improve the atmosphere, but certainly not to bring in any extra fans, and that would obviously come at a fairly significant cost. So I think it's unlikely at this stage that we'll explore that opportunity until such time as we can learn if we hang around at Brisbane Road for long enough, whether we can improve those facilities at the back of the house, which would allow us then, if we wanted to invest in safe standing. And I've been brought up on terracing, and I know that a lot of fans would think that when fans are stood up, it increases the atmosphere. People are more likely to sing and shout and create atmosphere, and I get all of that. But it really only makes sense if we can actually bring more people inside the stadium, which at the moment, much to Nigel's frustration, because they don't seem to have the same rules and regs of their stadiums in the States, we wouldn't be able to do.
Okay, so next one gives you both a bit of a blank canvas, actually. So it's coming from George, and he asks, what do you both see as the next steps for the club being?
Okay, so I think this kind of picks up a question that may come later. So redistribution is in, probably, I would say, being slightly optimistic, the final throes of discussion. As far as I know, we don't still have a firm offer from the Premier League, but the EFL seems confident we will get one, and there will be all kinds of controls. And without going into the detailed mathematics of it, a lot of it will be revenue driven. So what the Brits call turnover, that means the top line is important. So we have to find every way of growing our turnover. And we had a meeting as recently as 3 hours ago, where everyone, including George, went through their different departments talking about how we grow revenue. George, you told me before we started you thought that was a very good meeting.
Yeah.
And we have to boost our revenue. We have to find ways of using every inch of the stadium on non-match day to maximise our revenue, because we're going to be going against clubs in League One and potentially the Championship with far bigger stadiums. So if they have bigger stadiums, it means they can get more revenue. So we have to find ways to keep selling, keep making our Leyton Orient available wherever it is. So streaming is very important, and encourage people around the world, if they're watching, to sign up for our streaming. We'll come back to that. Non-match day, if you've got weddings, birthday parties, whatever, come to us. Christmas parties, come to us. New Year's parties, come to us. We've talked, to be fully transparent, we've talked to the Supporters Club about using their facilities when they're not using it, because it's a very vital piece of real estate. We're fortunate, as Mark touched on earlier, that we've got a lot of homes coming across the road. So we have to be totally focused on revenue. So I think the next development of the club is building revenue. The budget for this year is about £9 million. That needs to go up to whatever it can be, 10, 11 in subsequent years. So I think that's the next stage of our development. And then obviously part of moving the club forward is all the work Mark touched on earlier about the training ground and the stadium. Mark, anything to add?
No, I think it's. I think that's about right. We've got to build and grow the business, make it stronger, make it more sustainable, get ourselves ready to push for the Championship, get ourselves ready to try and do whatever's required to stay in the Championship as well. And as you say, Nigel, the redistribution will come with a whole host of caveats, one of which will be, quite rightly, cost controls. So the more revenue, simply put, the more revenue we can generate, more turnover we can generate, the more we will be able to invest in the playing squad. So therefore, clubs like Derby, particularly Derby in our division, I guess, when you talk about stadia, have got a lot bigger stadiums, a lot more facilities to hire out on non-match days. So I know fans have been a bit frustrated with things like introducing categories for games this year, but without trying to over egg everything, we've just tried to do everything we can to bring more money in so that we're able to invest as much as is humanly possible into the playing squad, as we want to build a club that can survive right at the top of League One and into the Championship. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing that off the field with the quality of staff we've got in the place, ticketing systems, all sorts. We're looking at everything that we can invest in and develop that will generate additional fans and additional revenue. Those are the two big focus areas, and obviously developing our staff as we move forward. But I've been at the club now, about 21 months now. I am delighted with the quality of staff and the effort that all of our staff put in. When you think that we have lots of games coming at us as Leyton Orient, then some of the staff have got to cover Spurs women's games, and there are other activities that we hope and plan to have at the stadium now that we've got such a good pitch that is much more robust, and as long as we look after it properly, will allow us to develop those revenue streams. And the staff have to work long and hard, and I have to say, on behalf of them all, they're a great bunch of people. Gone away from the question there a bit, George, but I just thought it was important to say that.
You mentioned Spurs women there, Mark, so I'm just going to throw to YouTube quickly. So Bill Clark asks, having Tottenham women matches at Brisbane Road, how beneficial and profitable is it for us?
So my answer on that is it's very beneficial, because in our conversations with things like stadium, potential stadium naming rights partners, that helps us because Spurs women feature on, frankly, they feature on TV live games more than Leyton Orient do. That's just the nature of the Women's Super League. It had some teething problems last year. I think Spurs had a lot of issues last year, both on the men's side and the women's side, which probably meant the women didn't get quite the focus it required. This year, they've made some internal changes. We can already see they're putting more effort and energy into building crowds. We want to work with them to build their crowds, because the more people they get in, the more profitable this deal will be for us. And we hope it will, the idea when we entered into the agreement with them wasn't just about the pitch. It was about joint marketing initiatives. We know for a fact there are lots of Spurs fans that adopt Orient. I've got friends who are Spurs fans who are coming on Boxing Day, they tell me, because Spurs aren't playing. There's just an affinity between us, and we want to maximise that without ever becoming, let's be really clear about it, we don't want to get so close that people think we're going to be a feeder club. But there's no reason why we can't share sort of marketing ideas to help them with their crowds, which, as I say, when people are inside the stadium, that revenue comes to Leyton Orient, not to Tottenham Hotspur. So back to the point earlier about looking at how we can maximise revenue, it's a very important part for us. Had problems last year and is improving this year, and I've every confidence that as Spurs come to grips and be more competitive in the Women's League, that their crowds will pick up, and it will become even more profitable than it is for us. It certainly helps our bottom line.
Something you touched on at the beginning of that answer, Mark, was stadium naming rights. So that's a question that's come in as well from Phil. He asked, how close are we to renaming the stadium?
Oh, this is a difficult one. I mean, I've gone on record as saying that we turned down an opportunity a few months ago for a variety of reasons. The number wasn't right, and then the people that were interested tried to make some adjustments to it, let's say, at the last minute, which we weren't prepared to take. And I don't want to devalue the number that we've got in the plan for us to achieve. So we are close. but I don't want to sort of be a hex here. Really, we've had a number of really good conversations with a particular company and a couple of other companies as well. We're quite close with one company, but I can't say that it's definitely going to go over the line. But I am very hopeful.
Okay. I'll stick with you, Mark. Ray Weeks asks, what lessons, if any, have the club learned from the medical emergency at the Lincoln game on the 3rd of October?
Yeah, I have to say that was probably in 20 odd years of working in football, that was the worst night of my life. And as I've been asked the question, the first thing I want to do again is just to, the family have been through a lot, and just to pay our respects to Derek's family and friends. We've worked closely with the family since. We continue to talk fairly regularly with his son Matt. The first things first. We lost a member of the Orient family, and it was an awful evening, and not really helped by the EFL decision. Probably was the only decision they could make, but not really helped by what they've done. So, firstly, we just want to pay our respects to Derek. What I would say is that, I want to firstly, the first thing I should recognise is that supporters on both sides were hugely respectful, both on the evening and since. And Lincoln have been tremendous in terms of their fans, as indeed were our fans on the night. And one of the things one of our recommendations to the EFL is that any crowd emergency should lead to an immediate cessation of the game. And it's to our credit that our fans took the law into their own hands to get the game stopped. It's not something that I would ask fans to do, to come onto the field, but they did it for all the right reasons and completely understandably. So I want to thank the fans for everything they did on that night, as well as our own staff, who had to go through quite a lot during the evening, as well, as you can imagine. I have to say that Derek was treated within seconds, really, by as quickly as possible by staff that were on site, the paramedics that we had there, and then subsequently more paramedics from the London Ambulance Service. London Ambulance Service then took over. That's the protocol. They took over the incident and took over the treatment of Derek. As I said earlier, recommendations have been made by the club to the EFL about what should happen to a game in future should the same thing happen. There was an immediate post-match debrief, which I sort of stood in on about 11 o'clock that evening, listening to the paramedics going through some of the issues they felt that when they first got to Derek, how we can improve things going forward. But pretty much we've had a debrief on it as well. There are things that we know we can do slightly differently, but I have to say that all of our staff were wonderful on the night, and the paramedics, the attention that Derek got as quickly as he did, obviously it didn't help in the ultimate outcome, but the staff were magnificent and did everything they could. So I just there are things that we've learned, not super critical things, but things that we can just think about doing slightly differently should the same thing happen. It's always a learning curve. You always learn from things, even though it was as sad and as tragic as this one. So I just want to thank everyone involved, and there have been some lessons learned. And as I say, we've made some recommendations to the EFL about what should happen in future in similar circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Next question has come in from Paul Fisher, and he asks, I know it may be a while off yet, but is it a realistic aim to develop the women's team to the point where the stadium will be in use more often with them for revenue generation?
Well, firstly, thank you for the question, and we're pleased with the progress they're making. I've seen 2 of their games this year. I probably won't see any more because they've lost both times when I've gone. So, but the last one was the FA Cup game, where I think we'd all agree they were somewhat outclassed. And I think that shows we've still got some way to go. I think there are lessons from other clubs who may have got to a professional level too quickly. So I think we're going to say steady as we go. Our goal is to have 3 of the games in the stadium each season. We've talked extensively about putting a women's game after the men's game, but without going into all the complexities, it is somewhat difficult logistically with the changing facilities that causes a problem. But it's still a goal to try and resolve that, to give fans the opportunity to stay in the stadium while they're there to see more. We'd love to get more fans to see the women. I think the 300 we had for the FA Cup game was good, but we can do better, I think. So, yeah, overall, we're very pleased with progress, and we're very focused on making sure people have the opportunity to see them. And I want to give a quick commercial. If they're not at the ground, go and see them at Buckers Hill. It's a great facility. You can get refreshments. It's a nice field, straight down the central line, and the women would appreciate your support.
Can I just add, one of the challenges the women's game in this country has got is that it's incredibly top heavy. So the WSL has got a great broadcast deal. The players earn pretty decent money. The minute you drop out of the WSL and then you come down below that, the crowds dwindle. And so we've got to try and find a way in this country, and probably all countries, away from just the top level, because we'd love to have the Orient women's team at Brisbane Road more often, but there is a cost to opening the stadium, and it only makes financial sense if we're going to get, we can cover those costs with admission prices. So the whole game needs to work as to how it builds from the bottom up, because at the moment, it's, in my eyes anyway, and this is a personal opinion, it's very top heavy, lots of money concentrated right at the top. And the minute you drop out of WSL, the numbers become very difficult to add up. So, we've spoken to Charlton at the start of this year, and it was their women's team was that the investment in there was costing the club about £1 million a year, because they were professional, and just the numbers don't quite stack up at the moment. It's growing at an exponential rate, but it is something that we have to tackle. I know that the FA are putting a lot of emphasis on this. It will only continue to grow, but it's a few years away yet, I fear.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Next one is coming from Alan Maddock, and he asks, it seems to me that the East Stand bar is order by app only this season. Why is this? And also, why have the TVs been removed?
Okay, so we've introduced Swipe Station over in the East Stand in a Swipe Station only bar. We had a review meeting with both our internal caterers and Swipe Station about a week ago. We will be making some slight adjustments from probably from the Oxford game onwards in that bar. So there'll be an option to use a till, but the whole idea of Swipe Station, where it's been very successful in our previous tests, is that it has shown that it speeds up the order process, speeds up the collection of whatever is ordered. We know there's a lot of education got to go into this, and people take a bit of time to change habits that have been formed over a lifetime of going to football matches. And I'm amazed to find that there are still significant queues in the East Stand for products that you can buy in a moment with Swipe Station. So one of the things that I've asked our marketing team to do with some of the Here to Help people will be to talk to some of those supporters to find out exactly why it is they would prefer to queue rather than use Swipe Station. Are we missing something here? Is it just habit? What else do we need to do to speed up the service? We want to generate more revenue, and we want to serve fans more quickly, so they don't miss any of the game, or they miss as little of the game as possible. So that's why we dedicated the bar there. We wanted to be bold and brave and try something new. It certainly has sped up service, but we know there's it's sped it up to the stage where we know we can take much more business in that East Stand bar. And for some reason, people are choosing to queue. So we're going to do some more investigations there and see what we need to do to get more people using Swipe Station, because it certainly seems to have had a beneficial effect for those fans that have got into the habit of using it. As to the TVs, I'm sad to report that we suffered a couple of break-ins, which means that we've begun to improve some of the physical security in and around the stadium and on the gates. It's just nature, I suppose. But so we started to improve that. Some TVs were stolen, as was a stat board. They've all now been replaced. So there should be no more issues with TVs there at all.
Excellent, thank you, Mark. One that's coming from YouTube on Swipe Station. So From the Sidelines asks, will Swipe Station come to the South Stand?
Yes, we're looking at how to integrate that. Again, we have a very weird stadium, ladies and gentlemen, and the way we operate in certain areas. So we are looking to incorporate Swipe Station at the South Stand soon. We're just investigating how best we can do that without making queuing systems worse and so forth. So we are looking to introduce it in the South Stand, which will mean that every stand has got it then, I think.
Okay, good stuff. Right, next question is from Matt Gregory, and he says and asks, the club has done a lot for the LGBTQ community with help setting up and supporting the Rainbows group. What are your plans for the future to help get people that aren't seen as traditional football fans coming to watch Orient?
Okay, so this is a great question. And going back to the days of Danny Macklin, he had this number, which I think is directionally correct, might not be 100% right number, but 95% of the people who live in Waltham Forest have never been inside the stadium. And some people pointed out that back in the days, which I can remember, we used to have these floodlights that stood up so high that you could see from everywhere, including from the tube. So I think a lot of people don't know we're there. So that's point one. Secondly, we are very conscious that Waltham Forest and surrounding boroughs and into Essex have a lot of groups, a lot of ethnic groups, and we're looking to embrace those groups as much as we can. I think the Rainbow O's, since they started, have been one of the more active groups. And according to what I've been told by my notes, we have content planned in December for the Rainbow O's to have a Rainbow Laces game against Derby in December. And we want everyone in the borough, no matter their colour, their background, their religion, their ethnicity, to feel comfortable. And I think it's part of being a family club. And, you know, the world's a difficult place, as we all know at the moment. And we want as many groups to feel, if they want to form a group, that they can. So we fully want to encourage as many people, whether they're true football fans or not, to come in, use our facilities, because the reason I think a number of us were keen to save Leyton Orient was it is a vital part of our community. And that goal has never changed. And I want to repeat one last time, as the leader of that group, the reason we bought Leyton Orient was to make sure Leyton Orient is around in 100 years' time. George may not have heard that, and even George probably won't be around in 100 years' time. But anyway.
Not quite as old as you, Nigel.
That's true. No one is. No one is. Even Mark's nowhere close.
Right, the next question is a more football-y one. It's coming from Gianluca, who asks, will we strive to be more of a goal-scoring side, as in the past couple of seasons we haven't scored more than 3 goals in a game very often?
Yeah, well, I think all I say is I listened to Rich's interviews after the game. I speak to him 2 hours after that, and I often say, hey, well, Rich, I heard your views, agree with them or disagree. And he's made that point several times. You know, we've like the last few weeks, we seem to have created a lot and missed a few. So I think no one wants to score more goals than him. So I think what I'd also say is life's a balance in most things. And for various reasons, we moved to 3 at the back. That certainly made us tougher to beat. And sometimes you lose a bit at the other end. I want to repeat what I said earlier. I think I'm very happy, not only with our coaching staff. Richie is a wonderful leader we all love, and he will figure it out. He doesn't need any help from me, no matter how many times I talk to him.
Okay, good stuff. Next one, this is probably for you, Mark, is coming from Tom, and he asks and says, the gallery bar is now very quiet 30 minutes after the game. Why did you stop supporters attending the gallery bar, and will you reverse your decision?
Okay, so we didn't make the decision lightly. We looked at the stats that showed, revenue and takings post-match. They weren't as significant as people might imagine. So even though the bar might have been busy with people, they weren't actually spending very much money. I'm being just very candid about it. The second part of that was we increased the prices, as everyone knows, across the club last year, admission prices, and the gallery is a significant investment for those fans that have chosen to do it. I also was keen to deliver them a degree of value in their package. They paid a lot of money for it, and in my personal opinion, it felt right that they had the benefit of what they had paid for. Now, I know this has been a contentious issue ever since I made the decision, and it's firmly on my shoulders, this decision. What we did do was we did a survey of our gallery season card holders, and we've taken feedback from them. So I will say what I've said on a couple of previous occasions, that some people wanted to keep it as is, some people wanted to go back to the way it was, but the majority asked that the members have the ability to invite a couple of people up after the game. And our task has been to find out or to work out an administratively easy way for that to happen, so that it doesn't inconvenience either our supporters, the gallery members, or indeed the staff that have to steward this. And I'm pleased to say that from the Oxford game and in advance of the Oxford game, gallery season card holders will be contacted by us, and we will start being able to have them having a couple of friends per member come up to the bar afterwards, and hopefully that will sort of suffice. That will keep everyone as much as is possible at a football club as happy as can be, and obviously hopefully spending a few bob at the bar as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Nigel, next one's for you. It's coming from Albert, and he asks, when are the O-Nuts coming back? And why not have a constant supply of Dunkin' Donuts at the ground for those like me with a sweet tooth?
Okay, so I'll try and make this simple because it's actually quite complicated. So the first thing you need to know, and I've said it before, I'm no longer involved with Dunkin' at all, and the company's been renamed Dunkin'. Very successful rebranding when I was there. So I've got no direct influence. We did have Dunkin' helping us, but they focused most of their development in the UK and the north. And then when they were doing that, we tried another local operation, which I don't think was quite so successful. We've now spoken to Dunkin' again. They've returned to London. We're in the middle of our discussions. They've actually opened a store in Wardour Street, famous for music. So I think all I'm going to say is discussions continue. We want to bring it back, but there are logistical issues in terms of manufacturing. You actually have to stamp it with the Orient emblem on it, but we want to do it, but I can't give a concrete date right now.
Okay. All right, that's good to know. Next one is probably for you, Mark. It's coming from Jack Finch, and he says, can you please sort out the facilities in the East Stand, because they're not very pleasant, and it's always chaos when trying to order food and beverages. Something needs to be done.
Yeah, I sympathise. I've been over there. A couple of fans have contacted me via Twitter, and I've gone over and met them at half time, and I appreciate that it gets very, very congested over there. There's real focus on trying to improve the facilities in the East Stand. We've put in some temporary things like temporary toilets. We've extended out a little bit so that people have got a bit more room to sort of take their burgers or their beers and what have you, as long as they're not in view of the pitch, going back to Nigel's frustrations earlier. One of the things we're looking at with our public caterer is what we can do with the East Stand during the close season. We had some plans last year that we had to shelve because of some of the operational issues to do with the installation of the pitch and some of the usage of areas in and around the East Stand. There are a couple of ideas on how we can knock down some walls and improve areas. We know the toilets aren't as good as they ought to be. That's putting it mildly. We will try and improve those. Sadly, I think other than introducing some temporary facilities as we have done, and we will try and bring some more in if really required, and if we're able to do so, it will probably have to go to the end of the season when we hopefully will have the ability to put some of these plans in place to improve the facilities. It still will be far from perfect, let's be honest, in an old stand until the thing is pretty much demolished and rebuilt is the only way we can really make it better. But we will try and make it as good as possible. But that work will have to wait probably until the close season. One of the areas we've looked at is actually being able to create some kind of fan zone out in Brisbane Road by closing Brisbane Road down and having a traffic management order there on particularly on Saturday afternoons. Those conversations are ongoing with the council, who have been relatively supportive on most of that. So that comes at a cost. Don't mind sharing it in being candid. It's between £2,000 and £2,500 a game to have a traffic management order installed, which the club would have to pick up. That's something the club pays for, not the council. But we have looked at what would be possible if we could create a little bit more space and some kind of fan zone out there. Currently, obviously, it's shared. Brisbane Road is shared with visiting fans, so that adds a degree of complexity to the situation. So very aware of it. I apologise that it gets so congested. We are very aware. We've made some slight changes, and we will look to make some more changes, but they probably won't be until the close season, on the basis that our contract caterer can work with us on that one to make it as good as possible.
Okay, thank you, Mark. A couple of football ones now. At Leyton Orient USA asks, has Leyton Orient ever thought about bringing in one or two players from South America?
Okay. As we've only got about 7 minutes left, I'll be quick on this. The answer is yes. Been contacted by more agents than I've had hot dinners from Latin America, and I always pass them on to Martin Ling. But it is difficult to bring people into the country unless they meet a certain points number, which is based on their games in certain leagues, and all leagues are categorized. And some of these people also have to have taken part in international squads over the last 2 to 3 years. Brexit, which I want to repeat my very strong political view, is the single worst political decision ever made, has also inhibited us. So it's all very difficult. I talked to Martin Ling about looking for players extensively, and the recruitment team has actually extended its reach so that we look at certain leagues and look for players. But I have to say it's all very difficult. And when you bring players from other countries, there's always a difficulty in absorbing them and supporting them, etc. So not easy to do, but it's something we're actively looking at.
Thank you, Nigel. We'll stick with the football themed one. So another one that came in was, we invested a lot into our midfield in the summer, but nothing up top. Why was this?
Well, we did bring in Joe Piggott and Dan, a guy, full-time, I've said him. Unfortunately, he got injured. We're very pleased with Joe's performance. He's really built into the team. I think certainly Richie's very pleased with him. We talked earlier about goal scoring. I think Dan's part of the answer, and I'm confident that Richie will sort it all out. And by the way, our midfield is excellent, and we've got options on the bench. And it's a personal view, we haven't seen Max Sanders yet. I think we saw him in like one game. He is going to be fantastic. So let's look out for that. And I also want to call out Brownie, who I think has been excellent and very consistent all year.
Good stuff. Thank you, Nigel. Right, we'll see if we can squeeze in these last few in the next 5 minutes or so. So Jamie Stripe asks, do we have to adhere to the same kind of financial rules in League One as we did in League Two? And would a cup run and the money that brings in potentially give us some more flexibility?
Jamie, excellent question. Basically, it is the same kind of rules. They're a little bit different, but basically the same. And going forward, as I said earlier, it will be very much based on revenue. And probably not as much based on people putting in equity, or as it's called, football fortune. But we desperately need a cup run. And I told Martin Ling on a meeting earlier today, if we don't win on Saturday, don't bother talking to me on Monday, because I may not be in a very good mood. So everyone's focused on winning against Carlisle. I think we're going to have a very strong team. And the whole club knows, for financial reasons and all kinds of other reasons, we need a cup run. We've not had one under our ownership. We need to get it done. Mark, could I make that any clearer?
No, I think that's fairly clear, Nigel.
Right, next one is probably for you, Mark. And I think we may have touched on this already, but with increased crowds coming over the last couple of seasons and further parking restrictions coming in, is the club looking into partnering with local schools, etc., to provide pay for parking on match days?
Short answer, George. Yes, we are. We've got a couple of half decent conversations going on with schools, but the short answer to it is we haven't got them across the line. There's a whole variety of reasons, which I won't bore everyone with, but schools is an obvious one. So we are talking to a number of schools within walking distance, or roughly walking distance of the stadium, and we hope to get some of those across the line. It works well at other London clubs. There's no reason why it shouldn't work for us.
Okay, excellent. I'll stick with you, Mark. So Pete Courtney asks, what, if any, initiatives are being proposed by the club to increase attendances to games and engagement by culturally and ethnically diverse local community of Waltham Forest and its surrounding boroughs?
Well, I think Nigel's kind of touched on our aspirations there. We're delighted to say that, you know, we're getting close, if not selling out, very close to selling out the home areas of the stadium. But we do want our audience to represent the community that we serve and that we represent. Robbie Minchin, one of the aspects of his role is to work with our trust to get into local schools where there are where some of our very diverse communities, where there definitely lots of our communities are in local schools and local groups. So we are working as hard as possible, talking to some of the elders in those communities as well, because you have to speak to different communities in a different way. You have to market to them in a different way than you would with other, we'd say we got plenty of Eastern European people in our vicinity who we know are very interested in football. But some of the, the information we've got is you have to approach that community in a different way than you do other communities. So we're doing as much as we can with the staff limitations we've got to try and spread our tentacles into all of our local communities.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I'm just going to give you one very, very last one. We've only got a few seconds to go, but Sean on YouTube asks, is there any news on a bigger and better scoreboard for the stadium?
Well, okay, so I don't want to get involved in a squabble between Nigel and Matt Porter. We are going to investigate how we can have a bigger scoreboard in the stadium. It doesn't come cheaply, but it would add to our commercial digital assets. So there's definitely a reason. I wouldn't call it a scoreboard. I'd call it, it would be a scoreboard, but it will also be part of the entertainment value inside the stadium. So I personally would love to see one in there, but I have to get the numbers need to make sense. So we think we can fit one either over one of the roofs or in the corners of the stadium. So we have explored it. We've got some more site surveys being taken out this year, but they're a significant investment, and I need to be able to prove to the board that if we do invest in it in the way we did with the digiboards around the stadium, that it will bring a return in.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. I think we're going to have to leave it there now, because I know, Nigel, you've got another call to go to.
Can I just say something before I go? I do have another call, but can I just ask you, George, to tell everyone where we stand on the FA Cup for streaming and all that on Saturday, which I think's very confusing, but we need to do it. I'm going to go, but can I thank everyone for their questions? This is a very important part of what we do at the club, and engaging with our fans who are also our customers. We're excited about where we are. We continue to improve. Do we always get it right? No. But thank you for your support. We really do appreciate it. and I'm going to leave you in the capable hands and George and Mark while I go off to another call. But thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you, Nigel. So yeah, I think we'll wrap things up there. Thank you for sending in all your questions, whether you sent them in advance or on the night. I'm sorry we didn't get around to as many YouTube questions as I would have liked, but I certainly kept Mark and Nigel busy. So just on Nigel's last point about Carlisle and live streaming, so it's an FA broadcast rule. We're not allowed to live stream the game at all anywhere in the world. So even if you're overseas, you can only listen to Saturday's game. That's the same for all FA Cup matches. So if you're an existing subscriber, be that an international live streaming subscriber or a current commentary subscriber, you can listen to audio commentary, but you won't be able to watch. And then we are allowed to publish highlights from, I think, midday on Sunday. So if you're not coming, then you'll either get the highlights on the highlight show, or you'll get them on our app and our website from sort of the middle of the next day. And I think we'll wrap things up there. So thank you again for sending in your questions. We'll definitely do these again. Apologies if we didn't get around to yours. If you do have any reason to contact the club, then feel free to get in touch, be that on social media or by email. So lastly, I'll say thank you to you, Mark. And I'll bring the stream to an end.
Thank you, George, for arranging it, and thanks. Just to add my thanks to Nigel for firstly everyone's support, and B, for everyone taking the time to send questions in. So thank you, George.
Thank you, Mark. Right, I shall leave it there.